Welcome into the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Brandon Kravitz here along with Nick Whalen on this fine Tuesday. Feels like it's been a while since Nick and I have linked up. We've got a lot of hoops to catch up on, a lot of action last night, 9 games across the NBA. Night 2 of Kawhi Leonard's return, an improbable win for the Orlando Magic, and a semi-starless Grizzlies-Mavs game that we saw last night. Memphis dominating that one. Wemby with 8 blocks, which I guess is the kind of performance we've come to expect from him. But hello to you, Nick. How was your holiday break, and what stood out to you last night, I guess, more importantly?
Yeah, Ben, it's good to be back on what feels like our first semi-regular schedule since like mid-December with all the holidays and whatnot. But good to be back with you, and a fun Monday night slate. It's good to have the NBA back on a real schedule as well. There were a few things that jumped out to me. First and foremost, I was looking to see whether or not the Milwaukee Bucks would get back on track. Back-to-back losses to the Nets and Blazers in their last 2 games. And, I thought they were in somewhat of a tricky spot, on the road at a Toronto team that really, quite literally, for the first time this season, had everybody. Like, there was nobody on the injury report for Toronto. RJ Barrett was back. Emmanuel Quickley's back in the mix. Scotty Barnes is healthy. So Toronto's still not a good team. They're 8-28, but I do think a lot of that has been injury related. I don't know that they want to be a good team this year, but I think they could be a better team if they wanted to, talent wise. But that was a good win for Milwaukee going into Toronto, dominating that game. They were up double digits at the half, no Chris Middleton. And then I think we got to talk about the Suns, who ended up kind of in a fortunate matchup. They're on the road, in Philly last night. They ended up winning that game by 10. Of course, Joel Embiid does not play. He's checked, I think, every possible injury box this year. This was a nose injury last night that kept him out. But I'm sure you saw the news on Sunday night that, the Suns opted to change their starting lineup. They moved Brad Beal to the bench. They moved Yusuf Nurkic to the bench. How does Brad Beal respond? Leads the Suns with 25 points on 10 of 15 shooting.
Well, yeah, it turns out Coach Bud was onto something with that. I was not locked in on that game, but clearly that sort of strategy worked. He still played 30 minutes, which was not too far off of what you saw from Kevin Durant. So starter, bench, sometimes I think we overrate that stuff. It a lot of that can be more ego driven than anything else. What's your closing lineup and how many minutes do you play is really what matters at the end of the day in the NBA. And Bradley Beal, if this is what wakes him up, then great. This is a great trade showcase for the Phoenix Suns, who would probably rather have Jimmy Butler at this point.
I think they would. I mean, Bradley Beal, of course, would almost certainly have to be involved in a Butler deal. The Miami Heat would have to want Bradley Beal, which I think is by far the biggest hang up here. And then, of course, Beal has the no trade clause. So I don't know if Phoenix ultimately would be a dance partner. I think they're certainly open to anything, right? I mean, if you're making a move as drastic as, benching ostensibly one of your stars. I know Brad Beal's not the player that he was 3 or 4 years ago, but it's still, you still don't really see stuff like this very much in the NBA. Players with name value being moved to the bench. I think Phoenix would be open for business. I don't know how much we could put into this one victory. I mean, I guess the lineup changes work for now, but I think you also caught the Sixers at a good time. Paul George was bad again last night, played 38 minutes, 5 of 18 from the field. Kelly Oubre and Tyrese Maxey kind of carried everything for Philly. I do think we need to keep an eye on, for one, Mason Plumlee, who, he's been a starter in the past. We know who he is. There's not a lot of surprise there with Mason Plumlee. You'll get some rebounds, you'll get some assists, maybe some blocks and steals. But, he's not going to be a high volume offensive player. But Ryan Dunn is really interesting. He's the rookie out of Virginia who moved into the starting lineup in place of Beal. And, one of those guys at the college level who, I was talking about him yesterday with Kirian on the show. And I gave him the Matisse Thybulle comp, not in terms of the.
I love that. I heard you mention that yesterday. That was so perfect.
Well, in terms of like the defensive stats that he put up in college, it was just one of those like, are these real? Like per minute steals, per minute blocks. He's a lot bigger than Thybulle, but he's not, he's not 7 feet tall, right? He's like 6'7", 6'8". And like the steals and blocks have not really translated at the level that I thought they would. Like he's been fine in that area, but he's not putting up crazy per minute block steal numbers. I think he's going to play a lot of minutes, though. Both he and Oso Ighodaro, the rookie out of Marquette, I thought both of these guys would be more developmental projects. And, really, they've been in the rotation for most of the year. And Dunn especially, I think, is going to be in that 25 to 30-minute range for the foreseeable future as long as he's starting.
I don't know if the Suns are sneaky deep or if Philly just has the worst bench in the NBA, but the bench point disparity in this game last night, How about 54-7 in favor of the Phoenix Suns? So you're right. Not only do you,
The Sixers barely played their bench, by the way. Like they went heavy. Like all the starters played 38, 36, 37, 44, 38.
it's still 7 points though.
It is crazy. No, it's crazy. I get that, but
it's nuts. And I mean the fact that they have to do that. If you look at up and down the names on that bench, the Ricky Councils and Doughtons of the world, there's a reason why they had to play the starters heavy minutes the way that they did. That team's in disarray. I do wonder at what point we have to start really panicking about the Philadelphia 76ers. It feels like we've been kind of waiting to hit the button, but at what point do you just do that? They've won 6 of their last 10, but this is still a team that's 14-20 on the season. They've been terrible. And without Joel Embiid, it's just not getting better. And there's just not a lot of light at the end of the tunnel here. I don't think we're there yet, but at what point do you think it's realistic to say, okay, we're officially out on Philadelphia being a good basketball team in the 24-25 season?
I might be at that point. There's a difference between, I think, being like a good team / title contender and being a playoff team. Like I still would be shocked if Philly doesn't make the postseason. It would be a lot more interesting if we only had the 8-team field, but I think it's going to be very easy for them to ultimately at least get into the play-in zone. And they're sitting.
But is that really the postseason? If you just make the play-in and then you get bounced,
yeah,
that doesn't
if you're
really
in
count.
the play-in, if you're in the play-in with say Chicago, whatever's left of this Miami team, Detroit and Atlanta, it's like chances are you're getting one of those playoff spots, right? You're getting the 7 or the 8, and this team would get crushed by Cleveland or Boston. And I still think if you're the Cavs or the Celtics, like you'd rather play any of those other teams that I just mentioned. Like you would ideally not like a first round matchup against Joel Embiid, Paul George, and Tyrese Maxey. Like that's still, you can talk yourself into like, man, if they get hot, but I don't know. Like how long are we going to keep doing this, right?
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say.
3 games in a row. It's like they're going to get in. I think it's just going to be kind of a sad, slow bleed out. And, we're probably going to look back at this season as essentially a lost effort. And, it's almost kind of similar to what's going on in Phoenix, I guess, where, you're never going to cross off the Suns, right? The Phoenix is sitting in 12th right now in the West. And at the same time, it's like if we got like a Memphis Phoenix or Houston Phoenix first round matchup, even though those teams have been way better and will likely be better throughout the regular season, you're still going to have a little bit of pause and be like, man, do I really want to bet against Kevin Durant and Devin Booker in a playoff series? Like that conversation's never going to die with Philly because of the names on the roster.
Well, but I think that's why it's important to have this conversation maybe before it becomes a regular conversation. Just start wrapping your head around this now that this is what this basketball team is. And then you'll be, exactly. And then you'll be more profitable for it in the future. Just don't get lulled into this idea that there's something that they are absolutely not. But elsewhere in the NBA, Milwaukee, your squad, shot 50% from deep last night against the Raptors, an 11-point triple-double for Giannis. He's dealing with a hand injury. You don't see an 11-point triple-double all that often, though, but I guess if anybody's going to pull it off, it's Giannis.
Yeah, this was kind of like a Russell Westbrook line last night from Giannis. 11 points on 8 shots, 13 assists, 12 rebounds, 7 turnovers. So Giannis was a little bit sloppy. This was a really nice bounce back game for Damian Lillard, who had really struggled over the last 2 or 3 games. Was still taking a bunch of shots, and the point totals looked okay, but efficiency wise, he had been pretty bad. 7 of 12, 5 of 8 from beyond the arc. Bobby Portis continues to play well for Milwaukee. He's going to be mentioned in just about any trade rumor that you see over the next month because Milwaukee is really limited as far as what they can send out. There was a report yesterday via I think it's John gonna butcher the pronunciation on this, Gambordado, the guy who's always got Phoenix Suns scoops, their radio guy out in Phoenix, who mentioned that the Bucks are one of a handful of teams having Jimmy Butler discussions. The Grizzlies were the other, which I think is really interesting because like Jimmy Butler, like he seems like he's been a perfect fit with the Miami culture. I think he'd be like somehow an even better fit with the grit and grind or whatever's left of that in Memphis. Milwaukee to me, I don't know if I would love that fit. It would probably have to include, sending Chris Middleton to Miami. I don't know if the Heat would be all that interested in that. Both players have another year left on their deal. So it would be a slight cost savings for Miami. And maybe you just have to get what you can for Jimmy Butler at this point. But I don't necessarily love the idea of adding somewhat of a non-shooter, into that Milwaukee lineup when you already have your best player who's not really a threat from beyond the arc. You're starting Andre Jackson, who's not really a 3-point shooter at all. But the Jimmy Butler to Memphis fit is an interesting one because Memphis has, a bunch of pretty intriguing young pieces that they've really had no choice but to develop over these last couple of years because of all their injuries.
Well, yeah, for sure. Memphis is one of those teams right now that I think is getting by with a roster that it'd be difficult to win with them in the postseason. When you brought them up, that's a team that I have not even considered yet. I hadn't heard that about Memphis. I love that. I think that would fit perfectly. This is already a team that is in terms of their star power, not exactly the best 3-point shooters in the world. So already lean in to what you are. Milwaukee, just based on the way Giannis plays, they have to have guys that knock down threes. Otherwise, it's just not really going to work. Damian Lillard, by the way, should send a thank you card to Miami for not making that trade work out back when he wanted to go play for the Miami Heat. But I like the Butler to Memphis idea. I think that Phoenix, I think those would be my top two options for Jimmy Butler.
The Phoenix thing just feels like kind of shuffling deck chairs. Like I love Jimmy Butler, the personality. I think the NBA needs guys like that for better or for worse. I don't know if he would save Phoenix. I think you'd kind of run into a similar issue where it's like, all right, you're adding a non-shooter to this team, and there's this kind of this like mythical belief that in the playoffs Jimmy Butler just transforms into a top 5 guy. I know he's done it in the past. He's also 35. Is that version of Jimmy Butler still in there? That would be kind of a desperation move for Phoenix. I can see him doing it, of course. But
they're desperate. So I think for them,
they are.
And he's an upgrade from Bradley Beal at the very least. But is that going to push them over the top? Probably not. I think Golden State would be interesting because they're a team that already shoots the 3 ball well, so they could use some of his veteran presence.
Like, what are you sending back? It would have to be Wiggins, I would imagine, because of
Wiggins
contract.
Has to go.
And then are you tacking Kuminga onto that? It's like
Definitely.
that would be really desperate. And I get it. You're trying to salvage whatever's left of the Curry Draymond era, but like Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, Trace Jackson Davis, all in the same starting lineup. Like I don't know if I love that. That would be a very odd fit. I could see it, but an odd fit nonetheless.
But this is why Jimmy Butler's been on 4 different basketball teams and he'll be on to his 5th is because he is an odd fit. He's an odd fit almost everywhere.
I feel like, that's true. But like every veteran player at this point has played for like 4 or 5 teams. So I don't think he's unique in that range. But, Milwaukee, there's obviously the Marquette connection, which would be cool. He was a Marquette legend. So that's all well and good. But, that only gets you so far. I will say there are Jimmy Butler next team odds up at the DraftKings Sportsbook. And these were posted last week, I think Wednesday or Thursday. So this was like before the big blow up and the suspension and all that. At the time they were posted, Miami was still the favorite. The market is first minute played after the trade deadline. So the trade deadline is February 6th. And less than a week ago, Miami was like minus 150 to retain his services. The Heat are now 4-1. The Memphis Grizzlies are now the betting favorite at plus 180.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'd be shocked. There's no way you could lay money on Miami being the team that he plays with. It feels like that.
He could still be on the roster and just not play. That's the thing. I don't know what's going to happen, man. This is an unstoppable force in Jimmy Butler versus an immovable object in Pat Riley.
Well said. The Knicks also fell to the Orlando Magic last night. A great example of how the NBA makes absolutely no sense at all sometimes. So the night before, Sunday night, the Magic play the Utah Jazz. The Jazz, who are bad when they have everybody available, without 4 of their 5 starters in the game. And we know the Magic have already been a depleted group without Paolo and without Franz, and now Jalen Suggs is missing a little bit of time. But at home, they've still been a unit, and they've still won games without these players. So you figure you can handle the Jazz. The Jazz smoked them. And then the very next night, against the Knicks team that they were 0-3 against going into that game, at MSG, on the second night of a back-to-back, they dominate the basketball game. It was just the perfect 2-night example of how this league makes no sense.
Yeah, we were breaking this game down on the RotoWire NBA show on Sirius XM last night, and kind of going back and forth, and giving the Magic their credit because this was a very Magic game to win with how the season has gone. But like you said, I mean, terrible schedule spot for Orlando. Second night of a back-to-back, played at home on Sunday, and then you got to go up to New York. Now, the Knicks were without Karl Anthony Towns, and he was ruled out, pretty close to game time. So I think that was something where they were maybe hoping he would play, and then you had to adjust. But still, I mean, the Magic are down, not only Banchero and Wagner, but also Jalen Suggs. I mean, they started Caleb Houston, Cole Anthony, Goga Batadze, Tristan Da Silva, and KCP, and still won this game. I mean, held New York to 94 points. The Knicks only hit 4 3-pointers, which is crazy for a team that's just been so good offensively. And, I was looking into this when I was, kind of preparing for this game last night. Orlando is allowing 6 fewer 3-point attempts per game than any other team defensively. Crazy. Like 6 fewer than the next lowest.
Yeah.
And, one of the props that I was looking at, Jalen Brunson under 1.5 made threes was plus 145. And Jalen Brunson only took 1 3 in 36 minutes. Like the Magic's perimeter defense is unreal.
They just sell out to stop the 3 ball. It's you stop the 3 and then Goga kind of protects the rim, and they live with the results. If a team shoots well beyond the arc against the Magic, they almost always win because the Magic can't keep pace. But last night in the numbers, there was a garbage time. I mean, like last second on the clock, the game was already over. Cam Payne knocks down a 3 with about, I think there was like 2 seconds left. So they actually only had 3 threes in actual game action. And that would have been the lowest on the season. No team has made less than 4 threes on the year. So they it was like right there. It would have been a great little nugget. Instead, you have to explain it because they did end up hitting 4 threes on the night. It was a weird game. Josh Hart, I was locked in from the beginning, and they just couldn't really get anybody else in a groove. The fact that Mikal Bridges was 1 for 7 from deep, he was a guy that found some open room on the court last night, and he just wasn't knocking him down. And Cole has had some really rough performances. He had a 35-point game a couple of weeks ago, and tonight or last night you got one of those good showings. Wendell Carter Jr., by the way. Last 2 games against New York, 2 points and 2 points. He scores 19 last night. Bad. So some things sort of correcting themselves there. Anything else that you want to hit on from last night? Any injuries before I get to this All-Star topic that I wanted to throw your way?
I think we gave a pretty detailed breakdown on, some of the medium to longer term injuries on yesterday's pod. So if you want to hear some, Jabari Smith talk, Kyrie talk, things of that nature, you could listen to Monday's episode. We did get a question though in the chat from P Dub who said, "Morning guys, but is there more to the Jalen Johnson injury?" So this is one that we could touch on, and obviously Atlanta playing tonight. They did not play last night. They play the Jazz on Tuesday night. He's been ruled out, dealing with a shoulder injury, missed their last game against the Clippers as well. As far as like, is there more to it? All we know right now is it's inflammation in the shoulder. So I don't think so. This could be something where, if he misses 2 or 3 games in a row and, maybe there's a little bit more concern there. But I think, if it was something more serious, we would probably know by now, because he has already missed a game, and I would imagine there's been a scan or an investigation into that injury. So my guess is it's nothing too serious, but Atlanta only has a 3-game week. So if you're in a league that does weekly lineups, best case scenario, he comes back Thursday at Phoenix and then gets Houston on Saturday. So in that scenario, I'm probably holding him out of the lineup.
Yeah, and tonight, do they really need him in this sort of game? I know they've lost 3 in a row, but talk about that Utah team that's playing way over their heads right now. If you have a chance to keep him on the bench for a minute, I think you can get by without him in a game like tonight. John Collins remains out tonight. Jordan Clarkson out for multiple weeks. So Keontae George also out. This is still a very depleted Utah Jazz team that the Hawks ought to be able to take care of this, and then we'll see what happens from there. The De'Aaron Fox injury that popped up, and he didn't play on the back-to-back set for the Sacramento Kings. Is this anything that you're overly concerned about?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's it's interesting timing, of course, with the firing of Mike Brown and Fox kind of being at the center of that, but probably not. Just dealing with what do they call it, a glute injury. He's missed 2 in a row. I would imagine they'll just kind of be cautious with him. But we probably should talk about that game. I mean, that was the game of the night in the late window, and one that I flipped on end of the third quarter, thinking, all right, I'll watch the 4th, see how this plays out. Absolutely insane game insane game that Miami had no business losing in overtime, double overtime, I should say. The Heat blew, I think it was a 17-point lead, like midway through the fourth quarter, gave up at one point an 11-0 run. And, Keegan Murray hit some huge shots. DeMar DeRozan, ended up hitting the dagger in the overtime period. Malik Monk, didn't have a great shooting night, but really continues to play well. Somebody who I'm so glad is a good NBA player. Felt like that could have gone either way, especially when he started his career in Charlotte. Like, probably one of my 5 favorite college players ever. And usually guys that I love in college don't turn out to be good NBA players for whatever reason. I don't know what the correlation is there, but he's been really good for them. And, Miami is just in kind of a tailspin right now with the Jimmy Butler stuff going on. Jaime Jaquez, by the way, had a 16, 12, and 10 triple-double with 5 steals and a block. So probably the best fantasy line he's ever had in his entire career. And then one thing I'll mention quickly on Sacramento is they do have their first-round pick, Devin Carter, back in the mix. He made his return over the weekend. Isn't playing big minutes, only played 9 minutes in a double overtime game last night, but somebody to monitor, especially if the Kings were to, part ways with someone like Kevin Huerter, try to shake things up. He's somebody that I loved coming out of the draft and, dealt with a shoulder injury that kept him out for the first couple months.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it too, because Sacramento has some of those pieces that you might want to hang on to just in case you do get that De'Aaron Fox trade, because it would enhance the value of guys. Like a more obvious name would be Malik Monk. I got a trade offer in one of my leagues for Monk, and it was a pretty fair deal. I can't remember the pieces, so I'm sort of butchering the story. But the general point is, I think in a normal scenario, I would have said yes to this deal. It was a really good offer, but I don't know what this team is going to look like if De'Aaron Fox gets traded, and that's a version of Malik Monk that I would want. Carter is more, obviously somebody that you can grab off the wire that kind of fits that same role as well. So are you starting to have that mindset, whether it's for Fox or for some of these other guys around the league, that you're pretty confident are going to get traded? Jaime Jaquez would be on that list too, because he has been so good when Butler hasn't played for the most part, especially last year. And so you wonder if he picks it up a little bit more. These guys and their value could change with those pieces moving on.
Yeah, Miami's definitely a team to monitor, obviously, with the Butler situation. So much of that because of the player that Butler is, the return that would have to come back. Like you're getting at least one like legit dude because of the contract. So let's say that Warriors deal that we talked about, it's like all of a sudden, you basically have to bring back Andrew Wiggins, who would be a key rotation piece for the Heat. So I'd like in that case, it's still probably a slight bump for Jaquez, but you're not trading Jimmy Butler just for like 2 first-round picks and just taking him out of the rotation. Like you're gonna have to bring something back in that deal. So I would pump the brakes a little bit as far as Jaquez just becoming like a 38-minute a night guy in that scenario. But yeah, I think Chicago is the other team that I would keep an eye on. I was telling Kirian on the pod yesterday, like if you can get your hands on Kobe White, if you have Kobe White, I would hold him because I don't think he's going to get traded. I think Vucevic's value is as high as it's going to get the rest of his career right now. So I think the Bulls, who, right now are in the typical play-in zone. They blew a lead last night and ended up losing. They ended up winning that game. Sorry. They're a team that I still think will look to make a move, whether it's Vucevic, whether it's Levine, maybe it's both. I think we could be looking at, a huge second half for Kobe White. But yeah, we're at that period. We're less than a month to the trade deadline at this point. So, kind of starting to try to predict, where these moves might come, especially if you're in the middle to the bottom of the standings and you need a jolt, that's something I would start looking at.
I could use some jolts in my life. Let's see. We got our listener questions coming up in just a couple of minutes, but I was looking at all-star voting in the NBA. Never really know what to make of that. I feel like I'm out of the loop with what's popular. I cannot wrap my head around LaMelo Ball leading all guards in the East with the first vote that came down, even with Paolo. And I'm in Orlando. I'm as plugged in as they get when it comes to this basketball team. I did not realize how popular he was around the country. Fourth among front court players, and he hasn't even played this season. Is there anything from the voting that stood out to you a week ago before we get to something more substantial?
LaMelo is the culture, man. I think we need to embrace that. We need to realize that.
Did you know this? Did you know how popular LaMelo Ball was?
I knew he was very popular among the 25 and under demographic. I didn't know he was leading vote getter among guards in the Eastern Conference popular. I mean, he's got according to the first voting returns, which came out last week. I mean, he's like lapping the field among guards. Like he's got like 200,000 more votes than Donovan Mitchell. He's got like 250,000 more than the Damian Lillard. He's almost double the amount of votes of guys like Jalen Brunson, Trae Young. He's got more votes than Luka Doncic, more votes than Stephen Curry, which is crazy. So yeah, you got to keep in mind the fan voting accounts for 50% of who ultimately are the starters. So I think this will be offset by the player voting and the coaches voting. I don't know if they're going to be going to the ballot box for LaMelo Ball. So it'll be interesting to see if he can actually build enough of a lead to start the game. But no, I mean it's not shocking. He's a super popular player. I think he's built this following, from the Ball reality show, which was one of those things that I was like, I've never watched that. Maybe I just missed that. I was a little too old, but I think people who are closer to LaMelo's age really like him and respect him. I also need to get your thoughts, by the way, on the LiAngelo Ball rap song, which has turned into like the meme of the year so far. Where do you come in on this?
Boy, am I going to let you down here. I haven't heard it. So I cannot formulate.
Have you just not been on Twitter for 4 days?
I guess that the algorithm has chose to fed me other things. I've been kind of knee deep in this Fox Sports 1 lawsuit, which is
fair enough. Fair. We don't need to talk about that.
Twitter has decided to throw that at me left and right. The WWE just moved to Netflix. We got a lot of things that are being thrown our way.
Yeah.
And the LiAngelo, is this a mixtape? What is this?
It's just a single that he released.
Is it good?
It's it is good. I think it's good. It's my type of music. It's like it's got I don't know what your music tastes are at all. I should know this, but I am the rap that I listened to in 6th grade is like still what I listen to. Like Lil Wayne was my top artist on Spotify this past year.
I like Lil Wayne.
It's got like a 2004 rap type of feel. It's turned into a meme as far as people have said that this sounds like a song that would have been on like Madden 2005 or NFL Street or NBA Live. I don't know if you're familiar with the producer Manny Fresh. But it sounds like something that Manny Fresh would have put out.
Yeah, you and I have not talked a lot of music in our time together, but it sounds like you and I have very similar tastes in music. So I think this is something I'm going to have to check out. I wish that I was armed and ready to give you the full breakdown of the LiAngelo song, but I would be talking.
We'll handle this after the pod and address it next week in full.
So I was looking at a couple of guys that we would say are unlikely all-stars, and maybe not for us that are in the weeds of it right now, but I'm talking about when the season started, if you were to put the prospective lists together of guys that we expect to make the all-star team, there are a couple of guys that are sneaking through, and I think more surprisingly in the Eastern Conference, I look at the West, and it's pretty status quo with who the guys are, but in the East, names like Jalen Johnson, Cade Cunningham, Tyler Hero. Is there anybody for you that if I say unlikely all-star, and we don't know who the all-stars are going to be, but just guys that you assume are going to make it, is there someone that rises to that list for you?
Yeah, the East is interesting because you have the Cavs at 31-4 right now, and historically teams that have that kind of record as we approach the All-Star break and the closing of voting, they typically get at least 2, maybe 3. It's sometimes more in the case of that Atlanta Hawks team back in the day. But that was also at a time when the East had like no talent, so it was justifiable to put like their entire starting lineup in the game. But I think the Cavs have a case to get 3, and I think Mitchell and Garland are probably in. Then maybe you pick one of Mobley and Jared Allen. Obviously the Celtics team has plenty of candidates. I think both Dame and Giannis are probably in Milwaukee. The Knicks have several candidates. I think Towns and Brunson have to be in. So, just like the top 5 teams in the East might account for, 6 or 7, maybe even 8 legitimate candidates. I don't know that Paolo's going to get in. We'll see when he comes back. And, if he can get enough tick here over the next month, maybe he can play enough games to justify that. That's that's almost more of a eye of the beholder thing where, like, obviously what we've seen from him so far, he certainly deserves to be in. And Orlando, having the record that they do, even without him, maybe that still kind of helps his case. But, like someone like Tyrese Halliburton, does he get in this year? Does he get in just kind of on past production and name value? I'm not really sure. I would put Cade Cunningham in over him. I absolutely think Tyler Hero deserves it. I think if the Heat get anybody, it has to be Tyler Hero.
Agreed.
Atlanta's interesting to me. Like, Trae Young is still the player with the most name value, but there might be a case to be made that Jalen Johnson has been their best overall player this season. I would be surprised if he gets in. I think if they get one, it's still probably Trae Young based on how this stuff works. But he would be a dark horse. And then, we talk about the Bulls, who are 17 and 19. The numbers that Nikola Vucevic is putting up are all-star caliber numbers.
Yeah, I don't know that you can fit him in. I think we're running out of spots here. That's the problem. And once you look at a couple of teams and you're getting 2 or 3 guys in, all of a sudden those 12 spots get soaked up pretty quickly. Right. I don't think we get anybody from Chicago in there. And I guess just based on voting, you can't leave LaMelo out. But I agree with you about the Hawks. I think Jalen Johnson is the all-star there, but Trae Young will get the nod.
I think from a math perspective, let's say the Cavs get, we'll say 2, the Celtics get 2, the Knicks get 2, that's 6, the Bucks get 2, all of a sudden you're at 8. I think I would put Cade in and I would put Hero in, that's 10. And I might be being conservative when it comes to, Cleveland and Boston. So basically, I think there might be 2 spots up for grabs. Do the Sixers get anybody? Does Tyrese Maxey represent the Sixers?
Yeah, it'd be weird if Philly didn't have anybody. So you probably throw Tyrese Maxey in there. And I mean, he's the only one that deserves a nod. Weird to have an all-star game without Joel Embiid, how good he is, but it is what it is.
Embiid should not be in this year. He should not.
No, definitely not. And I think you're right about the Magic. It's unfortunate because Paolo is obviously an all-star level player and would have been an all-star had he been healthy. I don't think he's going to have played enough games. It's still possible that he gets in. If he comes back and he's averaging 30 a night, I think you'll find a way to sneak him in there. Franz would have been an all-star also. Obviously, he's not even going to be healthy, most likely, come the all-star game. And if he is, he'll be just coming back to action. So they lose everybody from that equation. That eliminates a team that had a couple of options. And then who knows? There are some like sleeper candidates out there. A guy like Cam Johnson has been really good for the Brooklyn Nets.
He's not making the All-Star game. I would love for him to be a real candidate. He's not making the All-Star game.
He is. You know what he's going to be though? He's going to be at the top of the snub list. It's just so you can get to the character limit.
Yeah. I mean, he'll be in the conversation, and rightfully so. I mean, honestly, it might. Given what the numbers that I just laid out, like it might come down to Banchero versus LaMelo. And like, even if LaMelo doesn't get in as a starter, it's like the NBA probably wants him in. It's like if he like dominates the fan vote but gets nothing from the players or the coaches and he doesn't start, and you could see him getting a reserve spot based on the popularity. But the Hornets are 7-27, right? Like not many teams that are that bad get all-stars.
I mean, look, I'm a Magic guy, but if you lead the NBA in guard voting in the East, you deserve to be in the all-star game. And you're a good player, and it's not some Jeremy Lin's kind of vote. You deserve to be in the All-Star game.
Didn't like Zaza Pachulia almost make it that one year with the Warriors?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be an All-Star level type player, and then I will fit that criteria. If you're number one on any list, I mean, at the end of the day, it's the All-Star game. We're not voting for president here. Let's get the guys in that fans actually want to see. Real quick, any non-All-Stars. So this is going to be a big list, so bear with me. But any non-All-Stars that come to mind, guys that we did not just mention, that you would consider to be a buy low candidate in the world of fantasy basketball. Anybody that maybe say, let's shrink the list a little bit rather than the entire NBA. Guys that should have been part of this conversation, and they're just not. I mean, Paolo's not a bad option if we're talking about a guy that just hasn't been around. Franz, who's injured right now. Is there somebody, RJ Barrett, who we didn't bring up? I don't know if he would be considered buy low, but is there somebody that you can think of that fits that mold of, man, if they were just the best version of themselves or healthy, they'd be in this conversation, and that makes them a buy low candidate?
I mean, there's plenty of guys in the West, right? I mean, I think you can look at multiple players in Memphis. We could talk Chet Holmgren. For
That's a great
fantasy, it's
one.
kind of a different conversation. It's like when you're injured, I don't know if that necessarily makes you a buy low player per se. I still am holding out some degree of hope for Dante DiVincenzo in Minnesota. Like, he's shown some flashes over the last couple of weeks. Like, I was pretty much ready to write him off like 3 weeks ago, and then he put together a couple of good games. He was in the starting lineup lately, which should help. But it's been really up and down, and mostly down so far this year. I think you could look at, if we're talking potential trade situations, like I think Golden State will do something. And Brandon Pajemski is somebody who's kind of been written off for good reason. He's been terrible this year, but like if he were to be sent out somewhere at the deadline, get a fresh start somewhere else, especially if he were to go to a relatively bad team. I think he's somebody that could end up reviving his value. Other than that, I mean, there's not a whole lot. Like, Utah has a bunch of guys who I like on paper. They've had some injuries lately. They're going to have like 3 or 4 guys out again tonight. But I think with Utah, like, some of these guys who in theory could end up being traded might end up going to like a worse situation. Like someone like Colin Sexton, who's played pretty well so far. Like, he's been a rumored target for the LA Lakers, and basketball wise, that'd be great for him, to get out of Utah and go to a competitive team. But I think that would be a downgrade in terms of fantasy value.
I would agree. You gave me more names than I was expecting, so good on you. Let's get to the bounce. Your questions answered in rapid fire fashion. Let's start with Aunt G. Hey, fellas, I'm thinking of trading Cam Johnson and Nick Claxton for Devin Booker. Is this a low ball offer?
I don't think it's too low ball of an offer. I would definitely rather have the Booker side of this. So I don't think this is an offer that just gets you gets you like blocked in your league chat or anything like that. I think the Cam Johnson part of this is really appealing. Like, he actually, in terms of total value, ranks ahead of Devin Booker this season. So part of it is he's played a handful more games. He's played like 3 more games than Booker, but they've been pretty comparable fantasy players. So I don't think this is that crazy. Maybe you have a Brooklyn Nets fan in your league. I mean, Nick Claxton has been terrible. He's been one of the most disappointing players, I think, in terms of value relative to ADP this whole season, and just it's just not even strung together, games that are encouraging. Like, he's been like ejected 3 times, and it feels like every time
he puts such an attitude problem.
Yeah, every time he puts together a good game, he follows it up with like 7 points and 5 rebounds the next night. But I mean, people always need center depth, and there's a case to be made that he can't be any worse than he's been so far this year. I don't think he would be included in any trades that the Nets would make. I would worry maybe a little bit about a shutdown later in the season, because I do think Brooklyn is one of those teams at 13-23 that could try to back themselves into the bottom 4. You might have to end up sweetening the deal a little bit, maybe throw in another piece, but I don't think this is completely outrageous. I would rather have Booker than Cam Johnson right now, because I think there's a good chance Cam Johnson gets traded. And like we just talked about with Colin Sexton, almost anywhere that he would land would be a fantasy downgrade.
I have a feeling the answer to this will be yes. Alan wants to know, is Naji Marshall a good pickup for this week? Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic missing some time, so we're seeing Naji's usage go way up.
Yeah, it's kind of a take your pick between Naji Marshall. You can make a case for Spencer Dinwiddie, who's been really bad lately, but still playing minutes. Quentin Grimes, Jaden Hardy, who played well off the bench for Dallas last night. But Naji Marshall is the guy that moved into the starting lineup. He played 33 minutes. Probably would have played more. This game got a little bit out of hand late. Memphis ended up winning by 15. But he gave you 16 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, a couple of 3-pointers. I think he's definitely viable. And, not only are they down Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, and it might not just be this week. Like, I think Kyrie's probably out next week. Doncic is going to miss 3 more weeks. They also lost Daniel Gafford last night, who's going to miss, quote, some time, according to Jason Kidd. Obviously that's not like a positional 1-to-1 with Naji Marshall, but that's another 20 minutes that you're taking out of this rotation. So yeah, I think Dallas is the team that I'd be looking at right now. Any of those guys that I mentioned, depending on the depth of your league, but based on what we've seen so far, Naji Marshall is probably at the top of that list.
Colby wants to know, who can I trade for Joel Embiid? So, man, I don't really know. Well, I know why. I mean, he's a great player when he's on the
Trying to
court.
get
But are
Embiid?
yeah, exactly. Are you sure you want to trade for Joel Embiid, or are you just trying to sell someone so low that you're
Yeah.
willing to bring back Joel Embiid? I don't even know
Yeah,
I
well,
guess it's in that way. It's a good question. I don't know
right.
what I would begin to offer if I wanted to get Joel Embiid onto my roster.
Yeah, I actually think this is a good question because most fantasy managers are probably looking to get out of the Embiid business. But he's still been a top 20 guy on a per game basis. The problem is he's only played 13 games on the year.
Do you have to play in a daily lineups league for this to make any sense? If you're setting your lineup
Um,
for a week, are you still in the Embiid camp?
I personally would not be. He hasn't played more than 4 games in a row at any point this season, and the Sixers do have. I think they have 3 more back-to-back sets the rest of this month. They have a couple more in February, so that's really the concern. Even if you're an Embiid health optimist, you still have to factor in the back-to-backs. Like if they have a 4-game week, he's almost certainly not playing in all 4 of those games. So I personally, I don't really have any interest in rostering him, but look, this might be one of those situations where maybe you're not doing well and you're like, I got to do something. Maybe I'll roll the dice on Joel Embiid. So I think this is an interesting way to look at it because whoever has Embiid in your league is probably trying to get rid of him. Like, I don't think you're going to have to give up, like Domantas Sabonis or Karl Anthony Towns or SGA to get him. So yeah, I don't even know where I would start the negotiation on this. You still got to give up somebody of substance. Do you start with like the Jamal Murray range of players, somebody who's like kind of in that top 40 to top 60 range, would that manager just take the dependability of like Jakob Poeltl, somebody like that? You could do a my problem for your problem and try to offer like, an injured player and Brandon Ingram. Isaiah Hartenstein is actually somebody I would think about because once Chet Holmgren comes back, he's going to move into a reduced role. It's really tough to give you like the exact player, but that's kind of where I would look if you're looking for an offer that would be realistically accepted, but maybe even start the negotiation lower. Just if that manager is just trying to get somebody who will play significantly more often than Embiid, I think your options are pretty unlimited. It's like I don't know, throw him Rudy Gobert or throw him Ivica Zubac or somebody like that. Walker Kessler. I think I would rather have most of those guys than Embiid right now. But yeah, it's a really tough question for a lot of reasons.
All right, going to fit in 2 more here. Joseph Kim wants to know PJ Washington or Tobias Harris rest of season, 10-team, 9-cat, punting on turnovers.
Punting on turnovers. Yeah, I mean, I guess neither of these guys are like super high turnover players, so I wouldn't worry too much about that aspect of it. With Jaden Ivey ostensibly done for the season, we should see a boost from Tobias Harris, and yet in a great matchup last night against Portland, he played 37 minutes and took 8 shots. Still gave you 17 points, went 5 of 5 at the line. I would like to say Tobias Harris, like he's been the better player, he's been the more consistent player throughout his career. I think for the next couple weeks, I might rather have PJ Washington. He was great last night, 17 and 10 with 5 assists and 3 steals. He's gonna take plenty of threes. I for the next 2 to 3 weeks, the answer is PJ Washington. For rest of season, I still think I might lean on the history of Tobias Harris. I mean, he has scored at least 16 now in 4 straight games. I think the usage should tick up, gradually. It's been a pretty rough first half for him overall, but taking Ivy out of the mix is a big deal for Detroit. Although the Pistons are in a better position this year than they've been at any point in the last 5 years to backfill, right? It's like you have Malik Beasley who's played well. You have Tim Hardaway who played well last night. We'll see more of Asar Thompson. Maybe we see more Ron Holland. So while Harris will get a boost without Ivy, they have other options there.
All right, let's wrap with this one. Germ X wants to know, just received an offer, Austin Reaves for Derrick White. I would receive Reaves.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. So on the year, Derrick White has been the better player, as you would expect. But since the D'Angelo Russell trade, we've seen a version of Austin Reaves that I wasn't sure was actually in there. So if we look at the last month, the last 30 days of play, Austin Reaves has been about a round and a half, maybe 2 rounds better than Derrick White. So, part of it depends on your view of Austin Reaves. I think Derrick White's value is pretty static. He's just kind of going to be this guy, barring some major injuries for Boston. I mean, you look at Austin Reaves' last 6 games, 24 points, 10.5 assists, almost 7 rebounds. Doesn't really give you anything defensively, but gives you high volume threes. He's a good free throw shooter as well. It kind of depends on if you think the Lakers make another move. Like if they bring in Colin Sexton, I think that directly hurts Austin Reaves. I would gun for the upside here, honestly, and take Austin Reaves.
That's going to do it for us this week on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Of course, you can check back with more episodes from our variety of analysts. 4 episodes per week. We leave no stone unturned. I've been your host, Brandon Kravitz. He's Nick Whalen, and we will chat soon, Hoop Junkies.